Hey guys, tonight we step into a world that feels older than time itself. Picture yourself lying in bed, listening as I tell you about a universe where nothing yet exists. No stars above, no earth below, not even the sound of wind or the glow of the sun. Just emptiness. A massive, endless void that stretches forever in all directions. You probably won't survive this kind of place if you really found yourself there. There's no food, no air, no Netflix, just silence and darkness. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know your location and what time it is where you are. I love seeing where everyone is tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You drift through the emptiness known in Norse myth as Ginnungagap. It isn't just any void, it's a gap between two extreme worlds. On one side, Niflheim, a land of pure ice and mist. On the other, Muspelheim, a raging sea of fire. When the ice crept forward and the flames reached out, they clashed here in Ginnungagap, like hot coffee spilled on frozen ground. The steam, the sparks, the strange melting. This clash birthed the very first stirrings of creation. You can almost feel the icy sting on your cheeks and the blistering heat on your hands at the same time, like standing between an open freezer and a bonfire. It's uncomfortable, sure, but in myth, this is where everything begins. Heat and cold wrestling until something entirely new appears. Out of this clash drips water, and from that water forms the first living being, Ymir, a giant so massive his body feels like a moving mountain. He isn't exactly friendly either. Imagine waking up one day and finding out the first thing in the universe is a giant who snores louder than a jet engine. Ymir isn't evil the way villains are in movies, but he is dangerous simply because of what he is, raw, untamed life. But Ymir isn't alone for long. As the ice melts, another figure appears, a cow named Odhumla. Yes, the universe's second major character is a cosmic cow. She licks at the salty ice for food, and from her udders flows rivers of milk, enough to keep even a giant like Ymir alive. If you ever thought milk was just for breakfast cereal, think again. It's cosmic fuel here. Now, here's a quirky tidbit you'll appreciate. While Odhumla licks the ice to stay alive, she accidentally uncovers someone hidden in the frozen blocks. Bit by bit, as her tongue scrapes the frost, a shape emerges. First a hand, then a face, until finally a whole being stands free. Buri, the ancestor of the gods. Historians still argue whether this strange, ice-licking birth story is symbolic. Maybe it's about survival, maybe it's about discovery, or maybe it's just ancient people having fun inventing wild explanations. For now, you're standing in the void looking at these three: Ymir, the giant, Odhumla, the cow, and Buri, the proto-god. It feels like the very first awkward dinner party in the universe. One guy is enormous and grumpy, one is a cow licking ice, and one is silently thawing out from a glacier. Not exactly a recipe for a sitcom, but hey, it's a start. The void begins to feel less empty. You can sense a strange order forming. Drops of water fall like slow rain into the abyss. Sparks from Muspelheim glow briefly before fizzling out. Each sound echoes in the silence, as though the universe is trying out its very first notes in an endless song. But here's where things get interesting. Ymir the giant doesn't stay a lonely mountain of flesh for long. Out of his sweat, while he sleeps, more beings are born. That's right, when Ymir takes a nap, whole families of frost giants crawl out from his body. You probably didn't think armpit sweat could populate the world, but here it does. Another group of giants is born from his legs. Don't ask too many questions about how, or you'll never sleep tonight. Let's just say Ymir is a walking, snoring factory of giants. And these frost giants are loud, wild, and many. Suddenly, Ginnungagap isn't just a quiet void anymore. It's noisy, crowded, and maybe a little smelly. Imagine trying to get some rest with a horde of brawling frost giants stomping around. The world is starting to feel alive, even if it's messy. Meanwhile, Audhumla keeps licking the ice. Day after day, she works at the frozen blocks until Buri, the ancestor of the gods, is fully free. From him will come a line that leads to Odin himself. You don't know it yet, but the battle lines of the universe are quietly being drawn here. Giants on one side, gods on the other. It's like the world's earliest rivalry being planted in the soil of myth. Think about it. The first beings of the Norse cosmos are total opposites. Giants, rough, chaotic, tied to nature's brute force. Gods, clever, refined, reaching for order and control. It's a tension that will never go away, running all the way through the myths until Ragnarök. Right now, though, the void is buzzing with potential. Fire and ice continue to feed this strange nursery of life. Sparks float through the air like fireflies, freezing into crystals before vanishing. A cold mist clings to your skin. Beneath your feet, ice cracks and melts at the same time, making the ground feel alive. There's an odd humor in it, too. You can't help but laugh softly to yourself. Of all the things to shape the first world, why a cow? And why does Ymir sweat out giants like an accidental factory line? Maybe the Norse storytellers knew that creation isn't tidy. It's weird, it's funny, and it doesn't always make sense. And so, here you are, floating in Ginnungagap, watching the first living forms stumble into existence. A giant snores, a cow licks ice, a proto-god blinks awake, and newborn frost giants brawl in the distance. It's chaotic, it's bizarre, and yet it feels strangely cozy, like the first notes of a bedtime tale that will only get stranger. You're still drifting in the strange void of Ginnungagap, and by now the cast of characters is getting bigger. Remember Ymir, the mountain-sized giant, and Audhumla, the cosmic cow. They're not just sitting there like extras in the background. Their presence is about to kickstart the drama of Norse mythology. Ymir, the first giant, is not exactly the gentle neighbor type. He's massive, moody, and thanks to his snoring and sweating, he's already filled this newborn world with countless frost giants. They stomp around with booming footsteps, their voices echoing like thunder through the void. You can imagine them arguing over who gets the biggest glacier chunk as a seat, or who gets to wrestle first. Life, messy as it is, has taken root. And then there's Audhumla. You watch her calmly lick at the salty ice, her rough tongue scraping away little by little. Every day, more and more of Buri, the proto-god, emerges from that frozen block. First it was a hand, then a face, and eventually a whole figure. By now, Buri stands free, tall and strong, with that unmistakable aura of founder energy. He is the beginning of the divine line, though he doesn't do much himself except exist and pass the torch. From Buri comes Bor, his son, and from Bor come three remarkable children, Odin, Vili, and Ved. These three will be the game changers. While the frost giants are busy making noise, Odin and his brothers look around at the chaos and think, we can do better than this. And honestly, they're not wrong. Now, here's where the first real turning point in the Norse cosmos takes place. The brothers take one look at Ymir, the massive, sweaty giant, and realize he's too much, too big, too wild, too dangerous. Imagine if one single being could overrun everything just by sleeping. If you're trying to build a stable world, that's not exactly ideal. So Odin and his brothers decide it's time to take matters into their own hands. And by matters, I mean Ymir's entire body. Yes, the first big act of the gods is the slaying of Ymir. The three brothers attack, and the fight is fierce, though the details are hazy because the myth isn't exactly clear on what weapons they had yet. Still, you can picture Odin leading the charge, Vili and Ved at his side, as they strike down this colossal being. The ground shakes, the void quakes, and finally, Ymir falls. And here's the strange, almost poetic part. When Ymir dies, His body becomes the very material of the universe. His blood gushes out in a flood so massive that it drowns nearly all of the frost giants he created. Only a single pair survives, Bergelmir and his wife, who escape by floating away on what some stories call a wooden box. Historians still argue whether that was meant to be a boat, a coffin, or just an ancient metaphor for survival. Either way, these two frost giants go on to repopulate their kind, ensuring the gods will never be rid of their rivals completely. Meanwhile, Odin and his brothers get to work with Ymir's remains, and here's where things turn both gruesome and fascinating. His flesh becomes the earth beneath your feet. His bones turn into mountains. His teeth and shattered bones make the rocks and pebbles. His blood forms the seas, rivers, and lakes.
You're standing in this brand new world, still smelling faint traces of Ymir's blood as oceans lap against rocky shores. The mountains, once bones, rise sharp and jagged around you, and the clouds, yes, the ones made from brains, float lazily overhead. It's not exactly the kind of travel destination you'd find in a brochure, but it's the beginning of everything, and you've got front row seats. Odin, Vili, and Ve look at what they've created so far and realize something's missing. Sure, they've got land, sea, and sky, but the world feels empty, flat, and still. It needs shape, rhythm, and boundaries. Without them, it's just a big cosmic body made from an even bigger body, and that, honestly, is kind of awkward. So the brothers roll up their sleeves, or tunics in this case, and get to work. They decide to carve the universe into different realms, each with its own flavor and rules. Picture them like ancient world builders, laying out the blueprint for 9 interconnected regions. At the center of it all grows the great ash tree Yggdrasil, its branches and roots spreading so wide that everything is tied together. But before we explore the 9 realms, let's talk about the sky. Remember Ymir's skull propped up by those 4 unlucky dwarves, north, south, east, and west? Odin and his brothers decide the skull dome needs light. They grab glowing sparks from Muspelheim, the fiery land, and fling them across the ceiling like glitter at a birthday party. Some sparks stick as stars, others as clusters, and together they make the constellations. Historians still argue whether the Norse had specific constellations in mind, or if this was simply a poetic way to explain the night sky. Either way, it's effective. The dark dome now gleams with 1,000 tiny lights. And they don't stop there. To give the world rhythm, Odin places the sun and the moon into the sky. But instead of floating lazily, these glowing orbs are chased by wolves, Skoll and Hati. Every day, the sun and moon flee across the heavens, while the wolves snap at their heels. That explains why they move across the sky, and why, sometimes, they're swallowed during an eclipse. You'd think giant wolves chasing celestial bodies would be stressful, but the gods seem fine with it. Maybe they enjoyed a little cosmic drama. Now the 9 realms themselves begin to take shape. At the very top is Asgard, the home of the Aesir gods. Shining halls, high walls, and bridges of light. It's the deluxe neighborhood of the cosmos. Picture it like the penthouse suite of creation. Just below lies Midgard, the realm of humans. At this point, there aren't any humans yet, but Odin and his brothers already set aside the land for them. To keep it safe from giants, they build a massive wall from Ymir's eyebrows. Yes, eyebrows again. Apparently, those bushy brows were too good to waste. It's quirky, but hey, when you're building universes, you use every part of the giant. Then there's Jotunheim, the land of the giants. Wild, untamed, and hostile. It's like the bad side of town you don't want to wander into after dark. Giants roam here, plotting ways to trouble the gods. Farther still are realms like Alfheim, the shining home of the elves, and Svartalfheim, the dark and cavernous home of dwarves. The gods may not realize it yet, but these realms will one day gift them with treasures beyond imagination. At the bottom of it all lies Niflheim, the icy land of mist, and Muspelheim, the fiery land of chaos. These are the raw ingredients of creation, forever locked in opposition. It's like a cosmic freezer and oven placed on either side of the kitchen, endlessly fighting over the thermostat. And of course, beneath everything sits Helheim, the realm of the dead, ruled by Hel, Loki's daughter. But she hasn't appeared yet. That drama comes later. For now, Helheim is simply the quiet, shadowy place where souls drift. And finally, connecting it all is Yggdrasil, the world tree. Its branches stretch over gods and men, its roots dig deep into giants and the dead. You can imagine standing at its base, looking up at branches so vast that they blot out the sky. Birds roost in its upper limbs, serpents gnaw at its roots, and somewhere in the middle, a squirrel named Ratatoskr runs up and down, delivering insults between an eagle at the top and a dragon at the bottom. Yes, even the cosmic tree has gossip built in. The brothers aren't just architects, they're organizers. They've turned a dead giant's corpse into a living, breathing cosmos with layers, divisions, and energy flowing through it. From the cold emptiness of Ginnungagap, they've built a place where stories can actually happen. Here's a fun tidbit. Some scholars believe these myths weren't meant as literal descriptions of the universe, but as metaphors for human experience. The 9 realms could represent 9 layers of existence, 9 stages of life, or 9 levels of consciousness. Historians still argue whether the Norse storytellers cared about cosmic physics at all, or if this was just a really memorable bedtime tale. Either way, it works. You can almost see the sparks of fire sticking in the sky, the trees stretching, the wolves chasing across the heavens. And through it all, Odin watches. He's already the kind of figure who can't just leave things as they are. Where others see chaos, he sees a puzzle to solve, a canvas to paint. Vili and Ve help, yes, but it's Odin's ambition that burns brightest. He's not just building a world, he's laying the groundwork for power, wisdom, and the control he'll chase for the rest of his life. You breathe deeply as the scene settles. The void has become a cosmos, alive with light, layered with realms, brimming with potential. Giants still stomp in Jotunheim, waiting for their chance to stir trouble. The gods rise higher in Asgard, preparing to rule. And somewhere, waiting, is the space where humanity will step onto the stage. The story is only beginning, and you already sense that, while this balance holds for now, it won't last forever. You stand at the base of Yggdrasil, the world tree, and suddenly the universe feels less like scattered pieces of a puzzle and more like a living system. Its roots dig deep into hidden lands, its trunk rises like a skyscraper of wood and sap, and its branches stretch into the endless sky, holding the realms in place like ornaments on a cosmic chandelier. The 9 realms are not random neighborhoods, they are woven together by Yggdrasil's living energy. You can almost feel the hum of its roots under your feet, the pulse of its branches above your head. It's like standing inside the beating heart of the cosmos. The first realm you notice is Asgard, perched high among the branches. This is the gleaming home of the Aesir gods. Golden halls shine here, their walls reflecting light from stars flung across the sky. The most famous of these halls is Valhalla, Odin's massive mead hall, where warriors chosen after death will someday feast. The gods here carry themselves like rulers, always preparing for battle, always planning. But for now, the place feels new, bright, and full of potential. Next, your eyes travel down to Midgard, the realm of humans. At this point, it's just land, waiting for life to begin. Odin and his brothers have already built a mighty wall from Ymir's eyebrows to keep giants out. That image sticks with you. Giant eyebrows forming a shield around humankind. Strange, but oddly comforting. This will be the place of ordinary people, with their farms, villages, and eventually their stories about the very gods who created them. Farther along lies Vanaheim, home of the Vanir gods. You don't know them yet, but soon they'll clash with the Aesir in one of the great rivalries of Norse myth. Where the Aesir are warriors, the Vanir are tied to fertility, prosperity, and nature's cycles. Their land is lush and green, filled with rivers and fields. If Asgard is all about shining towers and military order, Vanaheim feels like an endless countryside. Then there's Alfheim, the shining land of the elves. Picture a place where the light always seems softer, glowing like a perpetual sunset. The elves here are luminous beings, beautiful, mysterious, and a little aloof. They don't exactly mingle with humans, but their presence adds a dreamlike quality to the cosmos. Opposing Alfheim is Svartalfheim, the dark and cavernous home of dwarves. You can almost hear the ring of hammers and the hiss of cooling metal echoing through the stone tunnels. Their skill will one day create Thor's hammer, Odin's spear, and Freyr's golden boar. But for now, they're just murmurs in the dark, working away at the roots of the world. Lower still lies Jotunheim, the land of the giants. Harsh landscapes, icy rivers, jagged cliffs. It's wild, unforgiving terrain. The giants here are not just enemies, they are forces of chaos, representing the raw power of nature. You can almost see them marching across glaciers, plotting ways to challenge the gods above. It's a land that feels hostile, yet strangely necessary, like the part of life that pushes back no matter how hard you try to control it. Then comes Niflheim, the realm of mist and cold. Here, icy fog covers everything, and rivers of venom flow from the dark spring well known as Hvirgamil. It's bitter, freezing, and unfriendly, but it's also part of the balance. Without Niflheim, there would have been no first clash of ice and fire, and no Ymir. You shiver just thinking about it, your breath already fogging in the imagined cold. Directly opposite is Muspelheim, the blazing land of fire.
You lean closer to the roots and branches of Yggdrasil, and something stirs in the shadows. The gods may be busy shaping worlds and throwing sparks into the heavens, but they're not the only ones waking up. In the dim caverns under the mountains, in cracks where light can't reach, new beings are beginning to blink open their eyes. First come the dwarves. You hear the steady clang of hammers echoing deep beneath the earth, like a heartbeat made of iron. They weren't born in some grand, dramatic way like Ymir or Odin. No, these strange little figures are said to have crawled from Ymir's flesh, wriggling like maggots in his dead body, until the gods gave them form and reason. Not the most glamorous origin story, but hey, they didn't let it stop them. The dwarves quickly prove themselves. Short, stocky, and not exactly model material, they make up for it with unmatched skill. They know the secrets of metal, stone, and fire. In their underground forges, they twist molten gold into ropes, hammer steel harder than any giant's bone, and carve gems that gleam brighter than stars. You can almost smell the smoke of their furnaces, the sting of sparks dancing on your skin as they work. These are the craftsmen who will eventually create treasures like Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, Gungnir, Odin's spear, and Draupnir, a gold ring that multiplies itself. But for now, they are still learning, experimenting, turning the bones of the earth into tools of wonder. You picture one dwarf holding up a glowing blade and grunting, "Not bad, could chop a troll in two." Above ground, another kind of being awakens, the elves. Unlike the dwarves, these figures shine with an unearthly light. They live in Alfheim, their realm of soft glow and endless meadows. They're graceful, luminous, almost dreamlike, as if they're walking beams of sunlight. If dwarves are the engineers of the cosmos, elves are its artists. They sing, dance, and whisper secrets that mortals might mistake for the sound of wind in the trees. And yet, don't let their beauty fool you. The elves are powerful in their own ways, tied closely to fertility, magic, and fate. Some are benevolent, offering blessings of health and crops. Others are trickier, causing illness or mischief if offended. You know that uneasy feeling when someone beautiful smiles and you're not sure if they like you or are about to ruin your day? That's elves.
What's fascinating is how the dwarves and elves balance each other. The dwarves dig downward, shaping the earth. The elves shine upward, embodying light. One realm is dark, smoky, and full of hammers. The other is radiant, filled with laughter and music. Together they show that the Norse cosmos is never just one thing. It's always contrast, always duality. Now here's a quirky tidbit for you. In some Old Norse texts, it's not always clear whether elves and dwarves were considered separate beings or just different versions of the same thing. Historians still argue whether the dark elves were simply another name for dwarves or whether they were their own species. The lines blur, reminding us that myths are living things, shifting with each storyteller. You walk between these two new groups and notice how they mirror human nature. On one hand, you've got the practical, gritty side, dwarves who solve problems with sweat, tools, and stubbornness. On the other hand, you've got the dreamers, the elves who live in beauty, mystery, and imagination. The cosmos is setting up its personality traits before people even arrive. Meanwhile, the gods are watching with interest. Odin, especially, sees the value in these new beings. He knows he'll need their craftsmanship and magic to arm himself and his family for battles yet to come. Already you can sense the first threads of alliances and bargains forming, gods and dwarves trading promises, gods and elves whispering favors. This is how myths often work. Relationships are currency, and every gift comes with a cost. The dwarves, for their part, aren't easily impressed by the gods. They're not afraid to bargain hard, and sometimes they even trick their divine customers. The elves, in their quiet way, keep a distance, offering blessings, but also reminding everyone they aren't just background characters. They too have a role in the drama ahead. The air of the cosmos shifts again. With dwarves hammering underground and elves shimmering above, the world suddenly feels richer, more alive. Sounds and sights layer on top of each other, metal ringing in caves, laughter drifting in meadows, the hiss of steam from forges, the glow of fairy-like dances in Alfheim. You pause and think about how different this creation story is from others. Most cultures have gods, giants, maybe a dragon or two. But Norse mythology gives you this strange variety: maggot-turned-smiths, glowing dream beings, gossiping squirrels, as if the storytellers wanted to remind you that life is both practical and strange, both gritty and enchanted. And of course, beneath the beauty and utility lies tension. The dwarves will one day demand high prices for their creations. The elves will weave themselves into tales of desire, jealousy, and magic. The gods may think they're in charge, but already these new beings hold power the gods can't match. For now, though, you simply walk through this newborn balance. Dark caverns glowing with molten metal and bright fields shimmering with elven light. You can feel the universe stretching its limbs, trying on new shapes. The frost giants roar in the distance, the gods polish their halls in Asgard, and here in the middle, two new peoples find their place in the story. It's another reminder that this mythic world is not tidy. It's messy, layered, unpredictable, and that's what makes it alive. You've seen giants rise from sweat, cows lick gods from ice, and dwarves crawl from a corpse like maggots before transforming into master smiths. By now, the cosmos is buzzing with all sorts of life, but there's still something missing. You. Not you exactly, lying in bed with a blanket pulled up to your chin, but humanity itself. The gods have carved mountains, hammered the sky into place, and flung sparks as stars, but there are no mortals yet to walk Midgard. And without mortals, this whole setup feels like a theater with no audience. So Odin, Vili, and Ve take a stroll along the seashore one day. Imagine the three brothers, tall, radiant, their cloaks fluttering in the salty wind, walking the edge of a brand new world. The waves crash carrying sea foam and driftwood, reminders that creation is still fresh and raw. Their boots crunch on sand that's never felt a footprint before. It's here, along the tide line, that they stumble across two logs. One is ash wood, rough but sturdy, and the other is elm, slimmer and more flexible. To most people, these are just pieces of driftwood. But Odin pauses, his single eye gleaming with that look of ambition you've already come to know. He doesn't see logs, he sees potential. And in that moment, the three brothers decide to do something no one has ever done before: create humans. Odin kneels and places his hands on the first log. He breathes into it, and with his breath comes life itself. The wood softens into skin, the cracks becoming veins, the hollow core filling with blood. You can almost hear a faint thump of a heart starting to beat. Vili steps forward and adds his gift of consciousness and intelligence. The figure's eyes flicker open, awareness sparking inside like a candle flame. Thoughts begin to form, the beginnings of memory and curiosity. Finally, Ve leans down and grants form, speech, and senses. The figure stretches, blinking at the light, tasting the salt air, hearing the crash of waves. And just like that, the logs of driftwood are no longer wood. They are Ask and Embla, the first man and woman. You watch as they stumble to their feet. Imagine what it must feel like. One moment you're a piece of timber, the next you're breathing, blinking, alive. The world around them must seem impossibly huge, mountains towering like giants, seas stretching to the horizon, the sun racing across the sky chased by wolves, and sparks glimmer like distant fires. Their hearts pound not just with life, but with a sense of awe. The gods look at them with pride. Odin especially feels the weight of this moment. He has taken a risk greater than slaying Ymir, greater than shaping the stars. He has created beings who are not gods, not giants, not elves or dwarves. They are something new, fragile, yet filled with potential. The gods give Ask and Embla Midgard as their home. Remember that eyebrow wall? Now it makes sense. It will protect humanity from the frost giants, who would happily stomp over their tiny huts otherwise. Within this safe circle, Ask and Embla will build lives, families, and eventually entire civilizations. You can almost see them exploring, touching grass with
The beach, where Ask and Embla take their first steps, fades behind you, and your gaze turns upward. High in the branches of Yggdrasil, a new city is rising, a shining fortress in the sky. The gods, satisfied with shaping humans and staking out Midgard, now focus on creating a home worthy of their power. Welcome to Asgard, the Golden Citadel. At first, it's little more than an idea. Odin and his kin look out across the empty heavens and decide this will be their stronghold. They gather stone, wood, and magic, and with each day, Asgard begins to gleam brighter. Halls rise, walls thicken, and bridges stretch out like threads of light. You can almost hear the rhythmic pounding of construction echoing through the cosmos, stone blocks grinding, hammers striking, laughter carrying in the wind. The centerpiece is Valhalla, Odin's hall. Imagine a building so enormous its roof is made from golden shields, its rafters hung with spears. The benches stretch endlessly, enough to seat thousands of warriors who will one day drink mead and swap stories until the final battle. The floor gleams with polished stone, the walls echo with the promise of laughter, and the air smells faintly of roasted boar. You step inside, and even though it isn't filled yet, you can sense the energy, like a stadium waiting for its first game. But Valhalla is not the only hall. Each god begins to craft their own. Thor builds Bilskirnir, the largest of all halls, with 540 rooms,
because when you're the thunder god, subtlety isn't your thing. Freya claims her hall, Folkvanger, where she too will welcome fallen warriors. The gods don't just want power, they want legacy, a place where their names will echo forever. And then there's the Bifrost, the Rainbow Bridge. Stretching from Asgard down to Midgard, it shimmers with all colors of light. You imagine standing at its edge, looking down at the human world far below. The bridge hums under your feet, alive with magic, but it's also fragile, so much so that even Thor is warned not to stomp across it too often. If gods had "do not exceed weight limit" signs, Bifrost would have one. Of course, every fortress needs defenses. The gods are aware that giants, lurking in Jotunheim, would love nothing more than to tear Asgard down. So they build massive walls, thick and high around their city. And here's a quirky detail. In one story, these walls are constructed with the help of a mysterious builder who demands an unusual payment, Freya herself, plus the sun and the moon. A steep price, to put it mildly. The gods agree at first, thinking there's no way he'll finish the work on time. But he does, thanks to his horse, Svadilfari, who drags stone blocks with impossible strength. Panic sets in. The gods realize they might actually have to hand over Freya, the sun, and the moon. That's when Loki steps in, shape-shifting into a mare. Yes, Loki becomes a horse, stay with me here, and lures Svadilfari away. Without his trusty horse, the builder fails, and the gods keep their treasures. Oh, and Loki later gives birth to an 8-legged horse named Sleipnir, which he gifts to Odin. Historians still argue whether this tale is symbolic or just proof that ancient storytellers enjoyed weird plot twists. Either way, Sleipnir becomes the most famous horse in all mythology, able to ride between realms with unmatched speed. Back in Asgard, the gods celebrate their growing city. Golden halls shine in the sunlight, gardens stretch across courtyards, and laughter fills the air. But beneath the beauty lies ambition. Odin walks the high walls, his one eye scanning the horizons. He doesn't just see a home, he sees a fortress, a symbol of divine authority. Each stone laid is a reminder that the gods are carving out a place above all others. The city takes on a personality of its own. It's not just a cluster of halls, it's a stage. Every feast, every argument, every bargain with giants or dwarves will echo here. You picture Thor storming through the halls, hammer in hand, bellowing at Loki for another prank. You imagine Freya gliding past, her cloak of falcon feathers trailing behind her. And Odin, always Odin, standing at the center, already plotting how to gather more wisdom, more power, more control. Here's a mainstream fact. Asgard wasn't just a mythic city, it was also a reflection of how the Norse imagined ideal leadership. Strong walls, communal halls, and endless feasts mirrored the way real Viking societies valued defense, community, and generosity. Kings and chieftains built mead halls where warriors could gather, drink, and feel part of something bigger. Asgard was the divine version of this, a hall not for dozens, but for thousands. And here's your fringe tidbit. Some scholars think Asgard may not have originally been a place up in the sky at all. Instead, it may have been imagined on Earth, a holy city that later storytellers lifted higher into the heavens. Historians still argue whether the Rainbow Bridge was always part of the earliest myths, or if it was added later to give Asgard a literal connection to humans. You wander through its shining halls and realize the gods aren't just building for themselves, they're building for story. Every wall will one day witness arguments, betrayals, and laughter. Every bridge will tremble under battles and bargains. Asgard is the gleaming heart of the myth, and it beats loudly, even now. For a moment, you pause at the edge of Bifrost and look down at Midgard. Ask and Embla are somewhere below, perhaps building the first fire, perhaps looking up at the Rainbow Bridge without knowing what it really is. They can't imagine the halls above, the walls of gold, the feasts of gods. But the gods are watching them from their lofty city, already shaping humanity's fate. And you can feel it too. The world is dividing into layers, humans below, gods above, giants lurking at the edges. The balance is precarious, but for now, Asgard gleams bright, the crown jewel of the cosmos. The shining halls of Asgard glow above you, but not everything in the cosmos is golden feasts and rainbow bridges. For every fortress, there's a rival, and for the Aesir gods, Odin, Thor, and their kin, that rival is another family of deities entirely, the Vanir. The Vanir live in Vanaheim, a lush and fertile realm, where the Aesir are warriors, obsessed with order, walls, and preparation for war. The Vanir are farmers, seers, and masters of fertility. Their magic is tied to crops growing tall, rivers flowing full, and families prospering. If Asgard is all about might and control, Vanaheim is about balance and plenty. Two very different vibes, and as you might guess, they don't get along at first. The first real clash between the two pantheons is known as the Aesir-Vanir War. You can picture it, thunder rumbling as Thor smashes his hammer into the ground, while the Vanir send spells of fertility and illusion back across the battlefield. The war is long and messy, shaking the 9 realms. You can almost hear the clash of steel against whispers of magic, the crackle of lightning against the soft rustle of growing vines. So what started it? The old stories don't give a clear answer. Historians still argue whether it began with a broken deal, a raid, or simply the fact that the Aesir and Vanir were too different to trust one another. Some say it began with the goddess Gulveig, a Vanir seeress who visited Asgard. The Aesir didn't like her strange powers and tried to burn her alive 3 times. But each time she stepped out of the flames unharmed, reborn, her eyes glittering with visions. If you've ever had a dinner guest who just wouldn't leave, imagine that, but with fireproof skin and prophecy. The Vanir, outraged at her treatment, struck back, and war erupted. The fighting raged on for so long that even the gods grew weary. Eventually, they realized something humans often learn the hard way. Sometimes, neither side can truly win, so they called for a truce. To seal the peace, both sides exchanged hostages. The Aesir sent over Honir, a tall and handsome god, and Mimir, the wisest of them all. The Vanir, in return, gave 3 of their own, Njord, the sea god, and his children, Frey and Freya. It was supposed to be a fair trade, but of course, it wasn't. The Vanir quickly realized Honir wasn't very wise on his own. He only looked impressive when Mimir whispered advice in his ear. Without Mimir, Honir froze up like a student caught.
With war behind them and Asgard gleaming above the 9 realms, the gods begin to settle into their roles. Each one carries a personality so distinct you could almost imagine them sitting across from you at a dinner table. Some you'd want as friends, some you'd rather keep at arm's length, and some, well, let's just say you'd better keep your eye on them. At the head of it all is Odin, the All-Father. Picture a tall, cloaked figure with a long beard, his one eye glinting with both wisdom and restlessness. The other eye? Sacrificed for knowledge, because Odin is the kind of guy who will literally gouge out an eye just to learn secrets from a magical well. He's not the warm, cuddly dad type, more like the chess master who's always 5 moves ahead, scribbling notes while you're still figuring out which piece is which. He seeks power not for vanity, but because he knows everything will one day collapse and he wants every scrap of knowledge to prepare for it. But Odin is also unsettling. He dabbles in cider, the magic of the Vanir, which was often considered unmanly in Viking society. He doesn't care. He'll bend any rule, cross any line if it means gaining wisdom. Ravens sit on his shoulders, Hugin, thought, and Munin, memory, whispering secrets from across the world. Wolves pad at his feet. His spear, Gungnir, never misses. He's a ruler, yes, but also a wanderer, a trickster, and sometimes a con man. You can almost hear him chuckling, "I didn't become king of the gods by playing nice." Next is Thor, Odin's son, and probably the one you'd recognize even if you've never touched a mythology book. Loud, straightforward, red-bearded, and with muscles that look like he's never skipped arm day, Thor is the god of thunder. He wields Mjolnir, the hammer that always returns when thrown, like a divine boomerang. The sky crackles when he swings it, and giants scatter when they hear it coming. But Thor isn't all storm and fury. He's also the protector of Midgard, the one humans called upon for safety. In many ways, he's more beloved than Odin because, while Odin schemes, Thor simply smashes whatever threatens his people. He's brave, loyal, and a little thick-headed. Imagine the friend who insists on carrying all the groceries in one trip, grunting and stumbling, but refusing to admit it's too heavy. That's Thor. Then there's Freya, the Vanir goddess who now shines among the Aesir. She's beautiful, yes, but reducing her to looks alone is like calling Thor a guy with a hammer. Freya is fierce, proud, and deeply tied to love, desire, and magic. She rides a chariot pulled by cats, yes, cats, and wears the dazzling necklace Brisingamen, forged by dwarves. But she's more than glamour. She teaches Odin cider magic, proving that her power is respected even by the All-Father himself. And she's no passive goddess of romance. Half the warriors who fall in battle go not to Odin's Valhalla, but to Freya's hall, Folkvanger. You can almost hear her purring, "I'll take the brave ones, you can have the leftovers." Her brother Frey is gentler, god of fertility, prosperity, and peace. Where Thor storms and Odin schemes, Frey blesses fields with grain, fills barns with livestock, and ensures the earth flourishes. He owns a golden boar that shines so brightly it lights the night, and a ship that can fold up small enough to fit in his pocket. Practical, absolutely. Frey represents abundance and good harvests, exactly what ordinary humans needed most. Njord, their father, rules over the sea and winds. Sailors pray to him before setting out, hoping his favor will bring calm waters. He's wealthy, generous, and oddly unlucky in love. His marriage to the giantess Skadi becomes a comedy of mismatched preferences. She wants snowy mountains, he wants sandy beaches, and neither can compromise. If you've ever argued with someone about whether to vacation in the mountains or at the beach, you know their struggle. These are the big names, but the roster of gods and goddesses is long. There's Tyr, the brave, one-handed god of war and justice, who will one day place his arm in the mouth of a monstrous wolf to protect the gods. There's Heimdall, the ever-watchful guardian of Bifrost, whose hearing is so sharp he can detect grass growing. There's Idun, keeper of the golden apples that keep the gods youthful. Without her, even Thor would wrinkle like an old raisin. Each god is vivid, flawed, and human-like in their quirks. They bicker, they love, they plot, and they fail. Unlike distant deities of pure perfection, these Norse gods feel close, like larger-than-life neighbors with divine powers and very mortal tempers. Here's a mainstream fact. The personalities of the gods often reflect the values of Norse society. Odin's hunger for wisdom mirrors the respect Vikings had for knowledge and poetry. Thor's brute strength represents their admiration for courage in battle. Freya and Frey's fertility ties reflect the importance of farming and prosperity in a harsh environment. Here's your quirky tidbit. Scholars still puzzle over how much overlap there was between the gods. For example, some believe Freya and the goddess Frigg, Odin's wife, may have originally been the same figure, later split into two characters. Historians still argue whether this was a case of mythological copy-pasting or simply regional storytelling blending into one another. You sit back and let these personalities swirl in your mind. Odin's calculating gaze, Thor's booming laugh, Freya's smirk, Frey's gentle blessing, Njord's salty sigh. They're not distant stars. You can almost hear their voices echoing from Asgard's halls. Together, they form a pantheon that is complex, messy, and endlessly entertaining. And lurking in the corner, watching, grinning with mischief in his eyes, is one more figure you can't ignore. But his story is only beginning, and it will change everything.
The clanging of hammers echoes again, but this time it's not just the regular work of dwarves shaping ordinary tools. Tonight, you're stepping into the forges of Svartalfheim, the smoky underground realm where the greatest treasures of the Norse cosmos are born. And, as usual, Loki has his fingerprints all over the story. It begins, as so many things do, with mischief. Remember how Loki once snipped off the goddess Sif's long golden hair? Thor nearly crushed him like a bug for that little prank. Desperate to save his skin, Loki promised to replace it, and not just with any wig, but with hair finer than gold itself. To do this, he slithered down to the dwarves, the most skilled craftsmen in all the realms. The dwarves worked their magic. Out of shimmering gold, they spun a head of hair so lifelike it would grow naturally once placed on Sif's head. They also created Gungnir, Odin's unstoppable spear, which always flew straight and true, and Skidbladnir, a ship that could sail in any wind, fold up small enough to fit in a pocket, and expand to carry all the gods if needed. Imagine your family's road trip van that folds up into your pocket. Pretty handy. Loki, ever the schemer, couldn't resist stirring up a little more trouble. He wagered with another pair of dwarves, Brock and Sindri, that they couldn't craft treasures as fine as these. If they won, they could claim Loki's head. Confident he could cheat his way out, Loki agreed. So Brock and Sindri stoked their forge and began. Loki tried everything to sabotage them. He turned into a fly, biting Brock's eyelids, his neck, even his hand, trying to distract him. But Brock never faltered. The hammer rose and fell, sparks flying like stars. Out of the fire came wonders, Draupnir, Odin's gold ring that drips 8 new rings every 9th night, a symbol of endless wealth. Gullinbusti, a golden boar with bristles that glowed in the dark, strong enough to pull Frey's chariot and light the way at night. And most importantly, Mjolnir, Thor's hammer. Its handle was shorter than intended, thanks to Loki's flybite, but it was unbreakable, always returned when thrown, and crackled with the power of thunder itself. When the gods gathered to judge which set of treasures was greater, there was no contest. Thor swung Mjolnir, and lightning split the sky. That was enough to declare Brock and Sindri the winners. Loki, of course, tried to wriggle out of his wager, claiming they could have his head, but not his neck. Classic loophole. The dwarves weren't amused, so they sewed Loki's lips shut. Just for a while. Long enough to remind him that words can be dangerous weapons, too. You can almost hear the forges ringing in the background, the hiss of cooling metal, the glow of molten gold. These weren't just trinkets. They were symbols of power, tied to the very fabric of the gods' stories. Odin's spear, Thor's hammer, Frey's golden boar, the endless ring, all born from dwarven hands, all shaping the fate of the cosmos. Here's a mainstream fact. These magical items reflect what Vikings valued most: strength in battle, wealth that multiplied, ships that could conquer the seas, and animals that provided light and transport. The myths turned practical needs into divine treasures. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some scholars think the short handle of Thor's hammer might not have been an accident at all. Instead, it may reflect how real Viking hammers looked: short and stubby, not long like modern sledgehammers. Historians still argue whether the story about Loki's sabotage was a later joke to explain the design. Either way, the image of Thor's stubby hammer has become one of the most famous symbols of Norse myth. The treasures weren't just shiny toys, they were woven into the gods' very identities. Without Gungnir, Odin wouldn't be the spear-wielding Allfather. Without Mjolnir, Thor wouldn't be the thunder god we imagined, smashing giants left and right. Without Draupnir, the image of endless wealth would be missing. These objects are almost characters themselves, each with a destiny. And of course, behind it all lurks Loki. If he hadn't cut Sif's hair, none of this would have happened. He caused the crisis, then created the solution, then nearly lost his head over it, and finally ended up with his mouth stitched shut. It's the perfect Loki arc: chaos, brilliance, punishment. You step out of the forges and look at the gods now, gleaming with their new treasures. Odin twirls Gungnir, its tip shining with divine precision. Thor grips Mjolnir, testing its weight, the air around him already rumbling with thunder. Frey pats the glowing mane of Gullinbusti, grinning at the boar's steady snorts. And Loki, well, Loki sulks in the corner, needle marks still prickling at the edge of his smirk. It's a reminder that in this mythic world, power isn't just who you are, it's what you carry. Weapons, rings, ships, and boars all hold stories waiting to be unleashed. The gods may strut through Asgard with their golden halls, their rainbow bridge, and their shiny new treasures, but out on the edges of creation, the giants are watching. And they're not exactly sending fruit baskets to congratulate Odin. No, these ancient beings born from Ymir's sweat and bones remember how the gods slaughtered his ancestor and used his body to build the world. For them, every mountain is a reminder of his bones, every river a reminder of his blood. And that doesn't exactly inspire neighborly feelings. The giants dwell in Jotunheim, a land of ice, jagged cliffs, and roaring rivers. It's not some cozy farmland. It's harsh, wild, and untamed. If Asgard is a fortress of order, Jotunheim is the sprawl of chaos. Here the frost giants and mountain giants live, always plotting ways to bring down the gods above. But here's the twist. As much as the gods claim to despise the giants, they can't seem to keep away from them. It's like that toxic friend group you swear you've cut ties with, but somehow you end up hanging out again. Marriages, feuds, bargains, even children. The Asir are constantly entangled with their so-called enemies. Take Odin, for example. For all his wisdom and strategy, he frequently seeks out giantesses for their knowledge of magic and prophecy. He knows the giants carry secrets older than the gods themselves. Thor, meanwhile, loves nothing more than stomping into Jotunheim with Mjolnir in hand, smashing giants left and right. Yet even he sometimes relies on giant allies, or falls for their tricks. One famous tale tells of Thor and Loki visiting the giant Utgard-Loki. The gods strutted in, bragging about their strength, only to be humiliated by a series of contests. Thor tried to drain a drinking horn, but couldn't empty it, because it was secretly connected to the ocean. He tried to lift a cat, but failed, because the cat was actually Jormungandr, the world serpent, in disguise. Each trick reminded the gods that the giants weren't just muscle. They were cunning, crafty, and dangerous in ways the gods didn't always anticipate. The giants aren't just enemies. Sometimes they're in-laws. Several gods take giantesses as lovers or wives, weaving the bloodlines together. Loki himself, born of giants, straddles both worlds, stirring trouble in each. The relationship is messy, complicated, and never simple. Here's a mainstream fact. Many scholars believe this tension between the gods and giants reflects the Norse worldview of nature itself. The gods represent order, community, and law. The giants represent the raw, destructive forces of nature: frost, storms, earthquakes. Humans lived between these forces every day, depending on order, but always at the mercy of chaos. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some stories say the walls of Asgard themselves were built as protection specifically against the giants. But remember the builder with the horse Svardafali? Yep, he was a giant in disguise. Even the very walls meant to keep giants out were almost built by one of their own. Historians still argue whether this shows the gods' hypocrisy or simply their desperation. You walk through Jotunheim in your mind. The air bites with icy wind, snow crunches beneath your boots, and the mountains loom like jagged teeth. In the distance you see giants sparring, one hurling boulders the size of houses, another wading through a river as though it were a shallow stream. Their laughter rumbles like thunder. To them, the gods are pests, arrogant little rulers pretending they're untouchable. Back in Asgard, Odin knows better. He may boast, but he remembers prophecy. The giants are not just rivals, they are the doom waiting at the edge of the story. At Ragnarök, the twilight of the gods, the giants will march across Bifrost, led by fire and frost, and as
You've seen giants stomping in Jotunheim, gods forging treasures in dwarven halls, and mortals taking their first breath on Midgard's beaches. But the Norse cosmos isn't just built on strength and steel. It's also woven with magic. Not the sparkly wand kind, but a darker, stranger power. Shifting shapes, bending fate, and carving secrets into wood and stone. At the heart of this magic stands Odin. For all his spears and ravens, Odin knows brute force alone won't save the gods. He hungers for knowledge that lies beyond weapons, knowledge that cuts into the fabric of reality itself, and he's willing to pay any price to get it. The most famous tale of Odin's quest for wisdom takes you to the roots of Yggdrasil. There, he approaches the Well of Erd, guarded by the Norns, the mysterious weavers of fate. These three sisters sit at the roots of the world tree, carving destiny into the threads of time. Past, present, and future all lie in their hands. And Odin wants a sip from their well, whose waters hold cosmic wisdom. The price? An eye. Without hesitation, Odin plucks out one of his own, dropping it into the well like a coin into a wishing fountain. Painful? Absolutely. Worth it? For Odin, yes. He staggers back with one empty socket, but also with vision far beyond what two eyes could ever see. From then on, he carries the weight of foresight, a blessing and a curse, since knowing the end doesn't mean he can prevent it. But Odin doesn't stop there. He wants more. So he does something no other god dares. He sacrifices himself to himself. He hangs for 9 nights on Yggdrasil, pierced by his own spear, without food or drink. Dangling between life and death, he peers into the abyss until the secrets of the runes reveal themselves. The runes aren't just letters, they're symbols of power. Carved into wood, stone, or bone, they can heal, curse, bind, or protect.
You can almost see Odin's hands trembling as he first scratches them, the symbols glowing faintly, whispering secrets no one else hears. With runes, Odin gains the power to shape destiny itself, or at least nudge it. Meanwhile, another figure rises in magical renown, Freya, the Vanir goddess. She is the master of Seder, a form of sorcery that weaves fate and bends outcomes. Unlike the straightforward runes, Seder is slippery, dreamlike, a tangle of visions and illusions. Through Seder, you can send your spirit into other worlds, see the threads of destiny, or curse your enemies with misfortune. Freya teaches Odin this art, flipping the usual gender roles on their head. In Viking society, practicing Seder was often seen as unmanly, but Odin doesn't care. He wants power, no matter how it looks. You can almost hear the whispers in Asgard's halls, the All-Father learning women's magic? But Odin shrugs. He'd rather be mocked than ignorant. The two forms of magic, Odin's runes and Freya's Seder, become pillars of the mythic world. One is carved, structured, and sharp. The other is fluid, elusive, and intuitive. Together, they show that magic in Norse myth isn't neat or singular. It's messy, layered, and sometimes dangerous. And then, of course, there's Loki, the ultimate shapeshifter. Loki doesn't study runes or weave Seder. He is magic. One moment, he's a fly buzzing in your ear. The next, he's a fish slipping through your hands. The next, a mare galloping into the forest. He doesn't seek wisdom like Odin or weave destiny like Freya. He simply bends the world because it amuses him. You can't study him, you can only endure him. Here's a mainstream fact. The Norse did use runes, not just as magical charms alone, but as an alphabet for carving on wood, bone, and stone. They believed the symbols carried power even beyond their sound. You can still see runestones standing in Scandinavia today, etched with names, prayers, or warnings. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some sagas describe Seder rituals involving chanting, staffs, and sometimes a group of women who would perform in trance together. Historians still argue whether these rituals were meant as divination, healing, or outright manipulation of reality. The line between religion, magic, and performance was blurry, just like the myths themselves. You picture Odin, his single eye burning, carving runes into a spear shaft. You picture Freya, her voice low and hypnotic, weaving Seder as visions ripple around her. And you picture Loki, giggling as he morphs into a fish just to slip out of Thor's grip again. Each one represents a different way of engaging with the mysterious forces of existence. Magic in Norse myth isn't clean or benevolent. It doesn't come with sparkles and fairy dust. It comes with sacrifice, eyes plucked out, nights of agony hanging on a tree, reputations questioned. It comes with risk, visions that may or may not be true, powers that may twist back on the one who wields them. It's closer the fire, useful but dangerous if handled carelessly. You lean back and realize how much these magical threads add to the story. Without Odin's runes, he wouldn't be the wise wanderer. Without Freya's Seder, fate itself would feel less alive. Without Loki's shapeshifting, the gods would lose both their troubles and their unlikely rescues. Magic doesn't sit politely in the background. It fuels the entire drama, just as much as spears, hammers, and swords. And somewhere in the background, you can hear the faint scrape of a blade carving runes into wood, the low chant of Seder humming like wind, and Loki's laughter darting between them like sparks. The world has become not just a place of stone and steel, but of symbols, visions, and shifting shapes. The gods think this magic will give them control, but you know better. Magic, like giants,
has its own mind, and sometimes it bites back. The clang of hammers fades, the chants of satyr quiet, and now the halls of Asgard echo with something more familiar, whispers of love, lust, and trouble. Because, let's be honest, even gods with golden halls, magic runes, and thunder hammers still get tangled in messy relationships. And in Norse myth, romance is never just candlelight and roses. It's bargains, betrayals, and the occasional giant-sized scandal. Take Freya, for instance. She may be the goddess of beauty and love, but she's no passive maiden waiting for suitors. She's proud, fiery, and makes her own choices. That's why every giant seems to want her. Time and again, messengers from Jotunheim march to Asgard with one demand: hand over Freya. For them, marrying her would mean power, prestige, and maybe a little revenge on the gods. For Freya, the answer is always no, and often accompanied by a glare that could melt icebergs. But once, the demand went too far. A mysterious builder offered to construct walls around Asgard in exchange for Freya, plus the sun and moon. The gods, thinking the task impossible, agreed. When the builder nearly finished on time, panic set in. They couldn't lose Freya, not to mention the celestial bodies that kept the world running. Enter Loki, who lured away the builder's magical horse by, yes, you remember this, transforming as a mare. Without his horse, the builder failed, revealed himself as a giant, and Thor's hammer quickly solved the problem. Freya, furious at even being bargained over, stormed through the halls, her necklace brisingmen gleaming with defiance. And then there's Skadi, a giantess who demanded marriage as compensation when the gods killed her father, Thiazi. She stormed into Asgard, armed to the teeth, but instead of war, they struck a deal. She could choose a husband from among the gods. The catch? She had to pick by looking only at their feet. Skadi hoped to marry Balder, the most handsome god, but instead chose Njord, the sea god, whose feet were pale and clean from the ocean. Their marriage was doomed from the start. Skadi loved snowy mountains, Njord loved sandy beaches. She hated the screeching of gulls, he hated the howling of wolves. They tried living together, splitting time between their homes, but eventually gave up. It was the mythic version of irreconcilable differences. Still, Skadi stayed connected to the gods, sometimes counted among them, showing again how blurred the lines between giants and gods could be. Meanwhile, Odin isn't exactly a model of monogamy. Though married to Frigg, he wanders constantly, seeking knowledge and sometimes companion.
Love, lust, and scandal ripple through the halls of Asgard. But the gods are not just feasting, flirting, and arguing. They're also wanderers, challengers, and seekers. Again and again, the myths place them on strange quests, journeys where they risk humiliation, danger, and sometimes their very lives. These adventures aren't always about glorious conquest. Often they're about proving strength, gaining wisdom, or just barely surviving a dare. The first tale to tug at you is that of Thor and the Midgard serpent. Picture Thor, the thunder god, setting out on a fishing trip with the giant Hymir. Not your typical weekend outing. Thor, disguised as a young man, insists on rowing the boat far out to sea. Hymir hesitates, his eyes narrowing, because he knows what lurks in the deep. But Thor is stubborn. He wants a challenge. For bait, he casually rips the head off one of Hymir's prized oxen and tosses it onto a hook. Hardcore, even for him. The sea churns as he lowers the line, the waves slapping against the boat. Suddenly, the water trembles, and something vast coils beneath. The line goes taut. Thor's arms bulge, veins straining as he hauls up his catch. Out of the waves rises Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, so enormous it circles the entire world. Its eyes glow,
Venom drips from its fangs, and its body writhes like a living mountain of scales. Thor braces his feet against the planks, sweat beading on his brow. He lifts Mjolnir, ready to smash the serpent's skull. But Hymir panics. He knows if Thor kills the serpent, the sea itself will heave in chaos. At the last moment, Hymir cuts the line. Jormungandr plunges back into the depths, and the boat nearly capsizes in the waves. Thor roars in fury, his hammer raised uselessly against the empty sea. It's a draw. But one day, the prophecy promises, they'll meet again at Ragnarök. From the stormy sea, your vision shifts to Odin, wandering with his cloak pulled low, staff in hand. Unlike Thor, Odin doesn't seek brute challenges. He seeks knowledge, even if it costs him dearly. You already know about his sacrifice at the Well of Urd and his 9 nights on Yggdrasil, but his quests don't end there. One of his strangest journeys is to find the mead of poetry. After a bloody war between gods and giants, the two sides spat into a jar as a truce gesture. Yes, really. From that spit, they created a man named Kvasir, who was so wise he could answer any question, unravel any riddle, and wherever he went, people marveled at his brilliance. But Kvasir's wisdom didn't last long. 2 dwarves, Fialar and Galar, invited him to a feast and killed him. They drained his blood into vats and mixed it with honey, brewing a magical mead. Whoever drank it would be filled with wisdom and the gift of poetry. Imagine sipping a drink that turns your ramblings into Shakespeare, or at least something better than your high school essay. The dwarves, never satisfied, went on to kill a giant named Gilling and his wife. Their son, Suttung, demanded vengeance. The dwarves, cornered, offered him the mead as payment for sparing their lives. Suttung accepted and hid the mead deep in a mountain, guarded by his daughter Gunnlod. Of course, Odin heard about it, and when Odin wants something, he gets it. Disguising himself as a wanderer named Bolverk, evil worker. Subtle, right? Odin approached Suttung's brother Baugi. He offered to work all summer in exchange for 1 sip of the mead. Baugi agreed. Odin labored in the fields, his one eye watching, waiting. When the season ended, Odin asked for his payment. Baugi, nervous, told him Suttung would never allow it. But Odin persuaded Baugi to help him. Together, they bored a hole into the mountain where the mead was kept. Odin transformed into a snake, slipped through the hole, and slithered into Gunnlod's chamber. There, he played a different trick, seduction. Odin charmed Gunnlod, spending 3 nights with her. In return, she let him drink 3 sips of the mead. But Odin doesn't do half measures. Each sip drained an entire vat. With 3 gulps, he drank it all. Now filled with the mead's magic, Odin transformed into an eagle and soared into the sky, the liquid wisdom sloshing in his belly. Suttung, furious, also turned into an eagle and gave chase. You can imagine the 2 of them, wings pounding, feathers tearing through clouds, the air shaking with their speed. As Odin neared Asgard, he strained, his body heaving, the mead nearly slipping from his grasp. Just as he crossed the gates, he spat the mead into waiting containers, but some drops fell, scattering into Midgard. Those drops, they say, are the source of mediocre poetry, the clumsy rhymes, the awkward verses, the roses are red stuff. The true mead stayed with Odin, reserved for skalds and poets worthy of greatness. You can almost hear Odin landing in Asgard, feathers falling away, a smirk tugging at his lips. He'd done it again. Trickery, sacrifice, seduction, and theft, all to secure wisdom. The gods toasted, the poets sang, and the story of the mead spread like honey itself. Here's a mainstream fact. The Norse truly valued poetry, especially the skaldic verse, which was complex, twisting with metaphors and kennings. A good poet wasn't just an entertainer, they were historians, storytellers, and truth keepers. the mead of poetry myth, explained why some people had genius while others stumbled around. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some scholars suggest the tale is also a sly commentary on alcohol itself. Mead, the honey wine of the Vikings, was known for loosening tongues. The idea that it could also grant poetic brilliance might be part myth, part observation of what happens after a few cups. Historians still argue whether the story reflects real ritual use of mead in ceremonies or just a mythic metaphor. You picture Odin in his many disguises, laboring in the fields, drilling a hole into stone, slithering as a snake, whispering to Gunlid in the dim mountain chamber, then soaring as an eagle with fire in his veins. It's a reminder that his hunger for wisdom knows no limits. He'll work, lie, seduce, steal, whatever it takes. And yet, beneath the cleverness, there's always risk. One slip, one slow wing blade, and he would have lost it all. Even gods skate close to failure. That tension, that balance between triumph and disaster, gives the myth its bite. Now, every time a skald recited a poem in a smoky hall, every time words flowed like a river of images, the listeners believed they were tasting Odin's stolen mead. And every time someone botched a verse, stumbling into clumsy rhymes, they blamed it on the spilled drops. You smile at the thought. Divine poetry, born of spit, blood, honey, and theft. Only in Norse myth could genius have such messy origins.
By now, you've seen Odin pluck out his eye, Thor wrestle sea serpents, and Loki father monsters. The myths can be grim, violent, and full of looming doom. But every once in a while, the storytellers leaned back by the fire, took a sip of mead, and let the laughter spill. Because Norse mythology isn't all fate and fury, it's also full of comic misadventures, moments so absurd you can't help but grin. The best of these stories stars Thor. Remember, Thor is the god of thunder, slayer of giants, protector of humankind. He's the one mortals prayed to when storms howled and enemies marched. So naturally, the funniest thing you can do with him is put him in a wedding dress. Here's how it happens. One morning, Thor wakes to find his hammer, Mjolnir, missing. Panic sets in, because without the hammer, Asgard is vulnerable. No weapon means no protection from giants. Thor stomps around, demanding answers, until Loki slinks in, smirking. With his usual nose for mischief, Loki investigates and discovers the thief, the giant Thrym. Thrym declares he'll only return the hammer if the gods send him Freya as his bride. Freya, hearing this, nearly explodes with fury. She shakes her necklace, Brisingamen, so hard the halls rattle. "I will not marry a frost giant," she thunders. Fair enough. The gods gather, worried. Without Mjolnir, they're helpless. Then Heimdall, ever watchful, proposes a solution. Disguise Thor as Freya. Dress him up, veil and all, and march him to Jotunheim for the wedding. Loki, of course, volunteers to be the maid of honor. Thor is horrified, the god of thunder in a dress, but the need is too great, and so they do it. You can almost picture it. Thor's burly frame squeezed into bridal gowns, a veil barely hiding his fiery beard, bracelets straining against his massive arms. Loki fusses over him, cackling as he adjusts the veil. They set out for Jotunheim, Thor scowling under layers of lace. When Thrym sees Freya, he claps his hands in delight. "Bring in the bride," he shouts. The hall fills with giants, eager for the feast. But Thor isn't exactly convincing. At the banquet, he devours entire oxen, gulps down barrels of mead, and glares at everyone with eyes like lightning. Thrym, confused, whispers, "Why does my bride eat so much?" Loki, quick on his feet, replies, "She hasn't eaten in 8 days, so excited for this wedding." When Thrym notices Thor's burning gaze, Loki leans in. "She hasn't slept in 8 nights, too eager to be your bride."
The giants nod, buying it. Finally, the time comes for the vows. Thrym calls for the hammer to be brought out so it can bless the union. He lays Mjolnir in Thor's lap, and in that instant, Thor rips off the veil, seizes the hammer, and smashes Thrym and every giant in the hall. The wedding feast ends not with kisses, but with thunder and broken skulls. It's absurd, bloody, and hilarious all at once. The god of thunder in drag, tricking giants long enough to reclaim his weapon. You can almost hear the Viking storytellers laughing as they recounted it, their audience roaring by the fire. But that's not the only comic tale. Loki features in plenty. In one story, he borrows Freya's falcon feather cloak to fly to Jotunheim and ends up in a series of slapstick blunders, being chased, tricking giants, and barely escaping with his skin intact. In another, he transforms into a salmon to avoid capture, wriggling furiously until the gods finally catch him by the tail, explaining why salmon tails are narrow. Mythology meet fishing tips. Even Thor, usually serious, ends up the butt of jokes. In one story, he visits the giantess Geirrod, who demands he come without his hammer. Thor stomps in anyway, only to be humiliated when he can't lift a cat, which is, as you know, secretly Jormungandr. The image of Thor grunting while a kitten barely budges is one that must have made ancient listeners chuckle. Here's a mainstream fact. Humor was vital in Viking storytelling. Skalds and storytellers mixed heavy themes with comedy to keep audiences engaged during long nights. Thor's cross-dressing tale, for example, probably had warriors in smoky halls roaring with laughter before the punchline came crashing down with Mjolnir. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some scholars believe these humorous tales were also subtle satire, poking fun at the gods themselves. By exaggerating their flaws, Thor's appetite, Loki's trickery, and Odin's constant scheming, the myths reminded listeners that even divine beings could be ridiculous. Historians still argue whether the wedding dress story was a sacred tale or just a comic skit passed down for laughs. Maybe both. As you picture Thor stomping around in bridal lace, Loki smirking by his side, and giants clapping in delight at their bride, you realize the Norse didn't just tell myths to frighten or inspire, they told them to entertain. Life in the North was hard. Long winters, scarce food, constant danger. A little laughter, even at the expense of their gods, was as nourishing as a warm fire and a full cup of mead. And that laughter lingers, echoing through the myths like thunder's softer cousin, a chuckle that reminds you not to take even the most powerful too seriously. The laughter of Thor's wedding dress still echoes in your ears, but it doesn't last long. In Norse myth, joy always carries a shadow. Tonight, that shadow falls on the god Balder, the bright, beloved one whose death marks the beginning of the end. Balder is often described as the most beautiful and gentle of the gods. His presence is like sunlight spilling into a room. Wherever he walks, the air feels lighter, hearts beat calmer, and even the sternest warriors soften. He is not just handsome, he radiates goodness. If Odin is wisdom and Thor is strength, Balder is the heart. Everyone loves him. Everyone, that is, except fate. One night, Balder begins to dream of his own death. Shadows creep into his sleep, whispering of endings. Troubled, he tells the other gods, and their joy turns to dread. Because in Norse myth, dreams are not just dreams, they're omens. And if Balder, the Shining One, is doomed, then no one is safe. His mother Frigg cannot bear it. She travels across the 9 realms begging every creature, every plant, every stone, every sickness, every flame, every piece of iron, to swear an oath never to harm her son. And astonishingly, they all agree. Fire promises not to burn him. Steel swears not to pierce him. Illness itself nods and says, not him. From that day, Balder seems untouchable. The gods, relieved, decide to test it. They make a game of throwing things at Balder. Spears, rocks, even axes. Every weapon veers aside, Every strike glances off. Balder laughs, the gods laugh, and Asgard echoes with the joy of invulnerability. Imagine it, a crowd of divine beings tossing blades at their shining friend, chuckling as they bounce away harmlessly. It's strange, a little unsettling, but in their relief they don't see the danger. But Loki does, and Loki never misses a weakness. Wandering in disguise, Loki approaches Frigg and asks her if she truly got everything to swear an oath. Frigg admits that she overlooked one thing: the mistletoe, a little plant too young and harmless to bother with. Just a sprig clinging to trees, delicate and soft. No threat at all. Or so she thought. Loki's grin spreads. He fashions a dart from mistletoe, sharp and small. Then he slinks back to the circle of gods, where they're still throwing weapons at Balder for sport. Among them is Hoder, Balder's blind twin brother, standing off to the side, unable to join the game. Loki slips up beside him, his voice smooth as honey. "Why don't you throw something too?" Loki whispers. "I cannot see," Hoder replies. "Then let me guide your hand," says Loki, placing the mistletoe dart in Hoder's grip. Hoder, innocent and trusting, lets Loki aim his hand. The dart flies. It pierces Balder's heart. The laughter dies instantly. Balder staggers, eyes wide with shock, and collapses. For the first time, silence chokes Asgard. The invulnerable one, the shining one, the beloved one, lies dead. The gods scream in grief. Frigg falls to her knees. Odin's one eye burns with fury. Thor clenches his fists, desperate to smash something, but even his hammer can't undo death. It is the first true crack in Asgard's golden walls. They try to make it right. Hermodon, another son of Odin, rides Sleipnir down to Helheim, begging Hel, goddess of the dead, to release Balder. Hel listens, her face half alive, half corpse, and says she will allow Balder to return if every being in the world weeps for him. And so messengers scatter. From gods to giants to humans, every creature mourns for Balder. Even stones and trees are said to weep for Balder. The world shudders with grief. But then, in a cave, they find a giantess named Tok, who...
The smoke from Balder's burning ship still drifts in your mind, and it leaves behind something sour. Because after that tragedy, the gods no longer laugh at Loki's cleverness. They begin to see him not as a mischievous companion, but as the root of rot spreading through Asgard. And eventually, they decide he must pay. The problem is, Loki doesn't stop. After Balder's death, his mocking grows sharper, his schemes bolder. At one feast, he barges into the hall of the gods, drunk on mead and venom, and unleashes what's called the Lokasenna, Loki's flighting. Imagine it as the world's worst roast session. Loki insults every single god, exposing their secrets, mocking their faults, even ridiculing Odin himself. It's less comedy and more poison disguised as humor. The gods seethe, but for now, they let him leave. Then comes the final straw. Loki arranges Balder's death to stick forever. Remember Thok, the giantess who refused to weep for Balder? Many believe that was Loki in disguise. And after that, there's no forgiveness left. The gods set out to capture him. Loki, knowing his luck is thin, tries to hide. He builds a house in the mountains with 4 doors so he can see in every direction. Each day he disguises himself as a salmon, slipping into the river to avoid capture. He even invents fishing nets to trick others, though ironically, that very invention becomes his undoing. One day, the gods arrive. They see the net drying by Loki's fire and instantly realize what he's been up to. They weave a copy and drag the river. Loki, in salmon form, darts through the water with frantic energy. At last, Thor snatches him up by the tail. He thrashes, wriggling, desperate to escape, but Thor's grip is iron. And that's why, so the myth says, salmon tails are narrow,
because Loki's writhing left them pinched. But now Loki stands before the gods. No disguise, no trickery left. They drag him to a cave, and there his punishment begins. First, they seize his sons. Some versions say they kill one outright. Others say they transform another into a wolf that tears his own brother apart. Either way, the gods take the entrails of the slain son and use them to bind Loki to 3 great rocks deep within the cave. It's brutal, symbolic, and meant to strip him of dignity. Above him, they hang a venomous serpent, its fangs dripping poison that falls onto his face. And here comes the heartbreaking part. Loki's wife Sigyn refuses to abandon him. She kneels beside him, holding a bowl to catch the venom. Whenever the bowl fills, she carries it away to empty it. But in those brief moments, the poison drips onto Loki's skin. The pain makes him convulse so violently that the earth itself shakes. That, the myths say, is the origin of earthquakes. And so Loki lies bound, writhing, hated by the gods he once laughed with, until the day when fate finally releases him, at Ragnarök. Here's your mainstream fact. This image of Loki bound beneath dripping venom is one of the most powerful in Norse myth. It symbolizes both punishment and waiting. Because everyone knew he wasn't gone for good. His suffering was merely the pause before the storm. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some Icelandic folktales centuries later, people actually used Loki's bound form to explain random earthquakes in their villages. Whenever the ground trembled, they'd mutter, "Ah, Loki's writhing again." It became a mythological explanation baked into daily life, like blaming traffic on Mercury being in retrograde. Historians still argue whether Loki was always destined to become a villain, or whether Christian scribes exaggerated his role to create a Norse version of Satan. Some point out that earlier myths show him as a companion to the gods, not their enemy. Others argue that betrayal was always lurking in his character, just waiting for Baldur's death to tip the scales. As you picture him chained in that cold cave, venom dripping, Sigyn patiently catching it, the weight of inevitability presses down. The gods might feel safer now, but the audience listening by the fire knows better. They know that bonds, no matter how tight, will someday snap. And when Loki breaks free, the end will come.
The air at Vigrid Field is thick. Smoke, poison, and fire twine together like a suffocating blanket. You're standing in the middle of Ragnarok's chaos now, and every clash feels like the last drumbeat before silence. Odin charges first, galloping Sleipnir with spear Gungnir raised high. His target is Fenrir, the wolf who has grown so vast, his lower jaw scrapes the earth, while his upper jaw brushes the sky. Odin drives straight in, fearless. For a moment, it feels like Father of the Gods might triumph. But fate is a cruel author. Fenrir lunges, and the wolf's jaws snap shut around Odin, swallowing him whole. The Allfather vanishes in a single bite. You want to shout, but then Odin's son Vidar steps forward. He's the silent one, the god who rarely speaks, but here, silence is his weapon. He plants one foot inside Fenrir's jaw, his shoe reinforced by all the leather scraps ever given by humankind. With this, he forces the wolf's mouth open and drives his sword deep into Fenrir's heart. The beast thrashes, chokes, and finally collapses. Odin is avenged, but the cost is unbearable. Meanwhile, Thor meets Jörmungandr. The Midgard serpent rears from the sea, coils stretching across the battlefield, spraying venom that blackens the sky. Thor raises Mjolnir and wades in, striking blow after blow. The serpent's scales crack, its body writhes. And finally, with one last earth-shattering swing, Thor smashes Jörmungandr's skull. Victory! But the serpent's poison already floods his lungs. He staggers 9 steps before collapsing, dead beside his enemy. Elsewhere, Freyr confronts Surtur, the fire giant. But Freyr gave away his sword long ago, trading it for love. Now he fights with only a horn, maybe even an antler depending on which version you hear. Against Surtur's flaming blade, it's hopeless. The fertility god falls, his body consumed by flame. Loki, freed from chains, meets Heimdall at last. The trickster's eyes blaze with hate, Heimdall's with grim duty. They strike, clash, circle each other like shadows, and in the end, both fall. 2 lives snuffed out in a single breath. Tyr, god of war, squares off against Garm, the monstrous hound of hell. They rip each other to shreds, a fight so fierce that neither survives. And then comes Surtur, towering above all, his flaming sword raised like the sun's last echo. He sweeps it across the battlefield, and fire rolls out in waves. Forests ignite, mountains collapse, oceans boil. The world itself becomes a furnace. Here's your mainstream fact. In the Prose Edda, Snorri Sturluson describes this finale as a cosmic firestorm, one so complete that even the heavens collapse. It's not just a battlefield that burns, it's creation itself. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some scholars think Surtur's fiery apocalypse may have been inspired by volcanic eruptions in Iceland, which were both terrifying and inescapably real for the Norse. Villages wiped out overnight, skies choked with ash. It wasn't hard to see a fire giant in those flames. Historians still argue whether Ragnarök was ever meant as the absolute end or whether it was always intended as renewal. Some poems clearly say a new world rises after the flames. Others hint the story might have been influenced by Christian apocalypse imagery, giving the Norse their own version of a final judgment. But in this moment, standing in the firestorm, all you feel is the weight of endings. Odin gone, Thor gone, Loki gone, Heimdall gone. The world collapsing under Surtur's sword, the sky itself falling into flame. It's destruction on a scale beyond imagination. And yet, even as everything burns, whispers of rebirth linger in the ashes. The battlefield goes silent, though silence here is strange. More like the hush after a storm has ripped apart your home. Smoke drifts, ash falls like snow, and the world you knew is gone. The sun swallowed, the gods fallen, the ground itself scorched into cinders. You take a breath, but even the air tastes burnt. This is the aftermath of Ragnarök. At first it seems nothing could survive. Oceans boil, mountains collapse, the sky itself splits. Yet in the midst of ruin, something stirs. From the ashes of Yggdrasil's roots emerged 2 figures, Leif and Leifthrazir, a man and woman. They had hidden deep within the tree, sustained by morning dew. Now they step out, blinking into the strange new dawn. These 2 are destined to repopulate the earth, carrying humanity into the next cycle. And they are not alone. From the wreckage of the gods' world come survivors. Vidar, who avenged Odin, remains standing, his silent strength intact. Vali, another of Odin's sons, emerges too. Modi and Magni, Thor's children, lift Mjolnir from the ash, the hammer now theirs to wield. And the sun, though swallowed, gives way to her daughter, shining as a new light in the sky. The world is scarred, but not dead. Rivers flow again, green sprouts from blackened soil, and life cautiously creeps back. You can almost hear the earth sigh, like a wounded creature slowly healing. Here's your mainstream fact. Many Norse sources describe this renewal clearly. The Poetic Edda in particular promises that after Ragnarök, the earth rises from the sea, green once more, and crops grow without sowing. It's not just the end, it's also a beginning. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some scholars believe Lif and Leifthrazir hiding in the tree might symbolize seeds stored for replanting after disaster, like a mythic memory of people saving crops through famine. Historians still argue whether the whole New World vision was truly pagan
or if Christian influence seeped into the sagas, since the imagery of destruction followed by renewal feels suspiciously familiar. Still, in the myth, the newborn world feels less like heaven and more like a reset button. There is no promise of eternal peace, only the cycle restarting. Gods fall, mortals survive, children inherit weapons and duties. The universe keeps spinning. As you picture Lif and Yggdrasil standing among the ruins, you feel a strange hope. The great fire has passed, the gods' twilight is over, and though the losses are heavy, the story isn't done. New generations will rise, new stories will be told, and perhaps, one day, even new troubles will grow from the ashes of this quiet dawn. You glance around one last time, the battlefield still steaming, the survivors stepping forward, and the sun's daughter lighting the sky, and realize you've crossed the turning point of Norse myth. The grand cycle has closed, only to open again.
The firestorm fades, but the echoes of it live on, not just in ash and silence, but in memory. You sit within the quiet ruins of the world, and now the question shifts. How do stories survive when everything else is gone? The Norse myths themselves are proof that even after Ragnarök, tales can live far longer than stone or bone. Picture this: long halls of timber, smoky fires in the center, men and women gathered with mugs of ale. Skalds, those Viking poets, stand up and weave sagas of gods and giants, not from books, but from memory. Their words ripple across the crowd, holding the myths together like invisible threads. No libraries, no print, only voices, trained to carry centuries. These skalds were more than entertainers. They were historians, teachers, and keepers of identity. A chieftain's power often depended on the poet at his side, singing not just of Thor's hammer, but of the chieftain's own ancestors, linking them to mythic greatness. Here's your mainstream fact. Much of what we know of Norse mythology comes from the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda, both written in Iceland centuries after the Viking Age, when Christianity was already spreading. Without those manuscripts, most of these stories would have disappeared completely. Here's your quirky tidbit. The oral tradition was so strong that some scholars argue parts of the Eddas may have been memorized word for word across generations, surviving like a kind of hard drive of the mouth. Imagine your cousin reciting an entire Marvel movie without missing a line. Historians still argue whether the myths we have today are true to the original pagan beliefs, or whether scribes like Snorri Sturluson sanitized, reshaped, or even Christianized parts of them to fit medieval audiences. But what you can feel, sitting in that Viking hall, is the heartbeat of a people keeping their gods alive with nothing but sound. Every laugh at Loki's tricks, every gasp at Thor's hammer, every sigh at Baldur's death, it's all fuel to keep the myth burning. And those myths travel. Traders, raiders, and wanderers carry them across seas. Echoes of Odin show up in Anglo-Saxon poetry. Hints of Thor drift into dramatic folklore. Even fairy tales bear the fingerprints of these ancient gods. Like sparks carried on the wind, the Norse myths leap borders in centuries. So here, after Ragnarok's flames, the real survivors are not just Lif and Yggdrasil. It's the stories themselves, carried by voices, caught on parchment, sung across generations. They ensure the gods never truly die. You step away from the smoky Viking hall and look around the centuries that follow. Though the skalds quiet down, their words ripple outward. The Norse myths, once carried only by memory and mead, find new homes, woven into sagas, art, and even the rhythms of everyday life. Imagine medieval Iceland, harsh winters, long nights, and families huddled around the hearth. Here, scribes dip their quills and set ink to parchment. The sagas are born, epic prose tales of heroes and kin, blending myth with history so seamlessly you can't always tell where truth ends and legend begins. They tell of settlers, feuds, voyages, but always with a whisper of gods in the background. A thunderstorm? Perhaps Thor passing by. A wolf's howl? Maybe Fenrir's echo.
Here's your mainstream fact. Sagas like the Volsunga Saga and Heimskringla preserved mythic themes well into Christian times, sometimes framing them as ancient history rather than active religion. It's like watching a faith become folklore before your eyes. And the myths slip into art too. Picture carvings on wooden stave churches in Norway where dragon heads leer from the beams. Are they Christian? Pagan? Both. The line blurs. On runestones, you'll find Thor's hammer etched right beside crosses, a mashup of symbols that hints at people hedging their bets, just in case. Historians still argue whether this blending was rebellion or simply habit. Did people cling to Thor in secret, or had he already become more like Santa Claus, half believed, half nostalgic, but still comforting? And then there are the weekdays. Every time you check your calendar, you're brushing against old gods. Wednesday, Woden's Day, Odin in disguise. Thursday, Thor's Day. Friday, linked to Frigg, Odin's wife, or Freya, goddess of love. You live inside these myths without realizing it. The echoes reached literature too. When medieval poets in England and Germany reach for grand metaphors, they pull Norse gods into the mix. Later, even Shakespeare sprinkles in faint traces. The myths refuse to vanish. They reinvent themselves. So as you walk through these later centuries, you see the Norse gods still alive, if quieter. No longer prayed to, but remembered, whispered, carved, sung. Like embers beneath ash, they wait.
The myths never really stop. They twist, they sleep, they rise again, just like the world after Ragnarök. You step into modern times, and suddenly the old gods walk among you in strange disguises. Think about the 19th century, when Europe was buzzing with nationalism. Scholars, poets, and politicians reached back into the sagas to build identity. Norway, Iceland, Germany, all looked to Odin, Thor, and the old heroes as symbols of strength and heritage. Some groups used these myths proudly, while others twisted them in darker directions, tying them to racial purity myths. The gods became banners for both pride and propaganda. Then literature grabbed hold. Writers like Wagner turned the sagas into operas, the Ring Cycle, where gods sang their fates on stage for hours. Later, J.R.R. Tolkien borrowed dwarves, elves, and even the sense of a twilight battle from Norse tales, weaving them into Middle-earth. Fantasy, as you know it today, owes much to the Vikings' imagination. Here's your mainstream fact. Many scholars trace modern fantasy tropes like magical rings, cursed swords, and worlds of elves directly back to Norse sources, such as the Volsunga Saga. Without those, your bookshelf might look very different. Here's your quirky tidbit. In the 1800s, some Icelandic schoolteachers still used Thor's hammer as a doodle in margins, like kids today scribbling superheroes. A little rebellion tucked between math lessons. Historians still argue whether that was playful nostalgia or a sign the gods never truly left. And of course, there's pop culture. Thor and Loki stride across comic books and movie screens, now armed not just with hammers, but with box office receipts. Odin shows up in video games, Valkyries in heavy metal lyrics, Yggdrasil as a plot device in role-playing adventures. You scroll Netflix, and suddenly Ragnarök is binge-worthy entertainment. The funny part? The old myths are stronger than ever. Millions who couldn't find Iceland on a map know Thor's hammer by sight. Scholars may sigh about accuracy. Loki probably never cracked so many jokes, but the spirit remains. The stories live because people keep retelling them, reshaping them, making them new. So here you are, at the end of the long Norse road, realizing the myths didn't die with the gods. They didn't vanish in ash or fade in sagas. They've been with you all along, whispering in the names of weekdays
echoing in fantasy novels, flashing across movie screens. The cycle is unbroken. The gods fall, the stories rise, and you, sitting here in the quiet, have carried them one step forward. And now, let's slow everything down. The battles are over, the voices of gods and giants have faded, and what lingers is only the soft hush of a story's end. Imagine the embers of a great fire glowing low, shadows stretching long and gentle across the ground. The chaos has quieted, leaving only stillness. Breathe into that stillness. Let your mind wander back through the paths you have walked, the roots of Yggdrasil, the halls of Asgard, the waves beneath Midgard. All those places still exist in imagination, and they'll wait patiently for you whenever you return. Tonight, though, you don't need to hold on to them. You can let the myths rest, like books closing softly on a bedside table. The rhythm of the story slows, matching the rhythm of your own breathing. Each inhale steadier, each exhale longer. The voices of Odin and Thor, Loki and Freya fade into distant echoes as though they are walking back into mist. And you remain here, safe, calm, at peace, watching the horizon glow faintly with the promise of a new dawn. Feel your eyelids grow heavy, your thoughts loosen, drifting like leaves on a quiet river. Whatever weight you carried into this night, set it down here. The myths remind you, even after endings, there is always renewal. Even after fire, there is green. And in your own life, tomorrow will rise fresh. So rest now. Let the last whispers of the Norse gods guide you gently into dreams. Sleep steady and deep, knowing you've journeyed through worlds and battles and back again, only to arrive exactly where you need to be.